can not only see, but I can feel your experience, Hayden, of being on the roof of that old hotel. It's the feeling of confronting a dark and deep chasm, whether it's of uncertainty or grief or despair. There are times where the answers seem unreachable and the truth seems impossible. The truth, for example, that this too shall pass.
And what if it doesn't? That's part of that darkness.
This episode of Becoming You is the third in a three-part series called The Gravity of the Soul. And if you missed the first two, no worries. You can go back and listen to those. You can still learn a great deal from the spiritual principles that comprise this episode. So the series is about how to apply spiritual principles to your life in the midst of all the chaos and collapse that we see all around us. So welcome to Becoming You. I'm Terry Hasty.
And I'm Haydn Hasty, and our mission is very simple. It's individual transformation through spiritual realization. We don't dissect current events or talk about personalities as much as I would like to. There's plenty of that going around. Our intent is giving you a way of seeing yourself in the world around you that is much more powerful and conscious and intentional than possibly you are aware. A new world in the middle of all of this chaos is being born, and each one of us is trying to figure out, as difficult as it is, what is our role in this? The institutions are being erased. The models that we've all grown up with are disappearing. And it's interesting that a dynamic of what is called nihilism is spreading in the United States. Nihilism being the feeling pretty much that nothing matters.
It's kind of a waiting for Godot.
Right, exactly. Well, maybe tomorrow. Well, we'll get to tomorrow. Nothing happens. Nothing changes. But, why wouldn't people feel this way when there's so much upheaval in just about every aspect of our life in every corner of the world? This dynamic of nihilism is being particularly noticed, and in some places is really being tracked and studied in Generation Z folks. I predict that we're going to have a new name for a new generation that's growing up in these times, and I call these folks Generation Doomers. The belief that everything is doomed and that there's no way out.
Every generation has a name. The name for my generation isn't good. I remember we're kind of like pot-smoking losers. But anyway,
I don't think that was the name of it. But.
No, I think it's millennials. But you were going to say you were.
Well, I was a baby boomer. So from boomers to doomers, it's like the 30-year-old that we spoke with, the young lady that we spoke with yesterday.
Well, and the 36-year-old the day before, and the 34-year-old last week. It's everything, Hayden, from the politics, the corruption that we see today, to climate change, financial uncertainty, to AI. It's a lot for people to process, especially when they don't have as long of a life behind them to see how things change and how things evolve. And I definitely want to be part of helping this generation of young adults not be the doomers.
Well, we are all involved in an extreme period of contraction. I probably should have said a period of extreme contraction. So all the more reason that it's important to gain a bigger picture, a long view, a spiritual understanding of the cycles of expansion and contraction. Because if we see contraction only as an isolated event without its relationship to expansion, then it basically is impossible to understand why things are happening and what is the purpose of that contraction. I understand why so many people see only the destruction and the collapse in the world today as reality. I get it. I understand that.
I mean, even in our own individual lives, when we're in a compressed time, when we're in a contraction, it is difficult to see beyond that when you've been flattened and you're, down on the floor, down and out. Our younger daughter's always explaining things. She's a science-minded person. She always says, "It's physics, it's physics." So I was thinking about in physics, expansion and contraction are processes, that where materials of all kinds change their volume when the temperature changes. And you see it when a sidewalk cracks with a temperature change, or you feel it when your rings get looser, if when your hands are cold. This condition of this behavior of contraction and expansion, it applies to basically everything: solids, liquids, gases. Everything generally obeys this molecular kinetic theory. And in the destruction phase, that energy that was locked up and really unavailable becomes available again. This kinetic energy is literally the fuel for the next process. And I think that's what we're in. It's like a star collapses under the weight of its own gravity, and then through the destruction, it produces new stars and even solar systems. So without the star's destruction, that really becomes the building blocks for planet and life. That energy would just remain trapped, and it would remain untapped, unused. So while it's true that expansion, growth, and creation always follow contraction, collapse, and destruction, it can be extremely difficult to remember that when you're getting squeezed.
Well, youngest daughter can call it physics if you want, but it's still a spiritual process. And why is it a spiritual process? Because the spiritual process is the significance of it in the human's life is about becoming. And it doesn't make any difference whether it's a star or a human or a kitten or a puppy. The puppy is becoming a dog. The kitten is becoming a cat. The human being is becoming a realized human being. So it's all spiritual. But it's also important to understand that in order to speed your ability up to, say, reach a certain outcome, like how do I overcome the depression and all this shit that I'm dealing with in my life in the middle of all this stuff. It can be an individual goal. It can be something temporary or something long term, like a new solar system or the destruction of the old, the collapse of the old is going to serve that purpose. If you can understand that, and that is what we're facing today, and understand how difficult it is to accept that.
And I think too, when she compares, science and physics, it is sometimes to explain the spiritual, because if it's true about the universe, it's true about us. So it's not one or the other. It is a definite combined energy.
Of course, I faced this in my own life when I was around 20 years old. I was home for the summer from school, but my mother and I did not get along, and so I just couldn't live at home. Once I got a job, I chose to live at this rundown hotel in downtown Monroe. And I had gotten a job at a local law firm as kind of a gopher because I really thought, okay, well, that's what I'll do when I graduate. I'll become an attorney. And there was a particular attorney in that firm that really demonstrated to me exactly the kind of man that I never wanted to become, that I never wanted to end up like that. And he was really the main reason why at the end of the summer, I mean, case closed. I have no interest in this. And how weird it would become that this same man would represent my wife in my first divorce when I filed for
That was your only
divorce.
divorce.
In my only divorce. But it was so dark that summer of not only being there at the law firm and seeing this reality that I had never seen before, but was also stuck in my own depression about my life, that I really thought about killing myself. I just, nihilism to me was the reality. This is insanity of living this way. And I was only 20 years old.
And did you feel at points like, how am I ever going to get out of this? How's it going to get better?
As far as I was concerned, there was no getting out. This is just the way it is, of working a job that you don't like, of living in absolute compressed confusion and uncertainty. How do I get a job? How do I ever XYZ, whatever it is that, the individual's dealing with. So at the hotel, I snuck around one night. I'd only been there about a week, but I found a way to get out on the roof. I would go out there and sit on the edge, on the roof with my feet dangling over, and I would, and I thought about killing myself. I sat right across from the courthouse clock. It was the bell tower, so to speak, and was almost face to face with it. I was that high up, but that was the way I viewed it. There is no answer to this. I grew up in the church, in the Episcopal Church. My mother always thought that I was going to become an Episcopal priest. And I would sit there and go, this is insanity. There is no meaning to this. So when I talk about nihilism, when I talk about that issue of depression and darkness, mine is not an intellectual understanding, but a lived experience of it, and how and why all of that would shift and change in a few short years because of we get help, we get clarity, people come into our lives to help us understand what's going on.
So as you're sitting up there facing the clock, which I find quite a significant image in this conversation.
I know.
And
I just thought of that,
Yeah.
the issue of time.
yeah,
Yeah.
and your feet are dangling down
Yeah.
like that. Did you have any I know you had the dark thoughts and the feelings of despair and of not being supported or not being even loved possibly, but did you have any glimmers, like, did the stars twinkle just for you sometimes? I mean, was there anything that as you looked out into the, abyss?
I can stop you right there. The answer is no. There's
Okay.
no need in playing with it. No, there's no relief from that, from the nihilism, because that's all you see all around you. Once the mind identifies the existence as being meaningless, well, nothing's going to jump in and say, yeah, but this is meaningful. No, that's not true. We become immersed in that darkness. And at the same time that I was experiencing, not wanting to be here, I was aware of this dilemma. Then where the hell am I supposed to go? If I don't want to be alive, then what happens to me? Where do I go? I was in the process, although I didn't know it at the time. I was in the process that learning that my life, even in the difficult times, was about creating a bridge from where I was, where I didn't want to be, to another place where I wanted to be.
I think that bridge, Hayden, is such an appropriate image because life is not static. Even you, probably at 20, knew it, even in your bones somewhere, that things were not going to always be that way.
No, that's not true. I'm sorry to correct you again. No, that is not there.
But it is true that life isn't static.
That
Whether
is
you
correct.
know it or not, it's
But
always
immersed in
going.
the darkness, and I understand why young people feel the way they do. There's no relief,
Yeah.
and this is the difficulty we face. So, but we'll come to why it's important then to at least consider that a spiritual path exists.
And that's the bridge that we're wanting to create, and it's that time, we're back to that, and life is always moving, nothing stays the same, nothing stays static, but things, change, and how they change it seems like a mystery or it's unknown, and that's why it's so essential to have a bridge.
Well, here we are. That's why the work is so important, because it provides the meaning, the understanding, and the application of spiritual wisdom and knowledge to your everyday life, even a little bit at a time, allows you to increase your balance, your strength, and your well being of many different forms, like mental and physical and emotional.
So many of you are aware that mankind is beginning this movement, this march from the mental to the spiritual. You might not have the words for it yet, but you are aware that something fundamental is shifting. And this evolutionary movement has begun. And you'll notice that it's really accelerating. It's taking place at a speed that I've never seen in my life.
So if you consider that we do have 4 doorways of possibilities of resolving this: the emotional, the mental, the physical, none of those have worked out. So what's the last one? What's the only one? The only doorway left. It is the spiritual. And this is a magnificent consideration that any individual should allow themselves to have, because it is the answer to all of the problems here in the lower area. For example, one of the things that is just, you can't keep up with it, the advent of AI. Many of these implications we can't yet define, but one in particular I want to bring up that's related to this issue of nihilism and the darkness in the world.
The fourth door of spirituality.
And the fourth door. It could be that AI is going to free up human focus for other pursuits. Perhaps that includes a deeper exploration of the meaning and the value of your life, of spiritual growth. I think there's a possibility, I'm not saying it's true, but there's a possibility that certain cognitive or mental, you could say, burdens that we all face in the growing up process are going to be lessened, if not outright eliminated. And if that's true, then it's kind of like me being back on the roof again. If I die, well, then where am I going to go? And so here in what I just explained in terms of AI, if that's true, then what are you going to do then?
It's like when you said mental burden, I had a picture of the Dewey Decimal System when I was, and I'll date myself here, but when I was in school, I had to physically go to the library, go to the card catalog, pull out the card, go, oh, the book I'm looking for that might have the answer I'm seeking is in this aisle.
Well, see, that's another reason for wanting to kill yourself.
But not, now you don't have to take,
teasing.
yeah, I know. Now you don't have to take time for that. It's kind of similar, don't you think, to the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s that altered the energy burden for human beings and, of course, animals. So just the invention of the steam engine, one steam engine could do the work of hundreds of horses.
Well, we don't have to analyze AI and its relationship to the doorway of the spiritual to understand that mankind is stuck in the mental. We have not lived the experience of that which we know. And so this shift from the mental to the spiritual is absolutely taking place in the middle of this collapse. I want to read this wonderful quote from a book called The Human Cycle by Sri Aurobindo. And this is what it says about the future that we are all hoping takes place. The individuals who will most help the future of humanity in the new age will be those who will recognize the spiritual evolution is the destiny and therefore the great need of the human being. They really specially not make the mistake of thinking that this change can be affected by machinery and outward institutions. They will know and never forget that it has to be lived out by each man inwardly, or it can never be made a reality for the kind.
I think that's such a powerful quote, Haydn. The individual who will most help the future of humanity is the one who is able to go inward.
We'll take up the path. Mm-hmm. We'll take up this movement from the mental to the spiritual. So with that in mind, in the first of 3 episodes in the series that we've called The Gravity of the Soul, we spoke about the traditional methods that have been utilized to help the individual increase their understanding of their existence, but the barriers that are contained in that journey in each of those traditional methods. In the second episode, we introduced 6 of the 12 spiritual principles in which each of us can actively engage by focusing not on the outer world and the collapse and the insanity and the corruption, I could keep going with that, but on the inner world. So as we've said before, Your outer world is a mirror image of your inner world. And this is why the individual path is so important, so vital. And until the inner begins to make that shift from the mental to the spiritual, the outer stays the same. And this is what we're facing.
The shift from the nothing matters or the nihilistic view to everything matters.
Even if there's, in creating that bridge, even if the individual simply says, there must be another way, that's a great beginning. So in this episode of The Gravity of the Soul, we're going to look at the additional and remaining 6 principles.
I think they'll make more sense if we go over the first 6.
Let's do that.
Okay. So in the episode before this one last week, these were the 6 principles. Number 1, I'm a spiritual being in a physical world, but I have to develop my spirituality. Number 2, before I could evolve, something had to be involved in my birth. Number 3, nothing can evolve out of me that was not contained in me at the start. Number 4, the truth of who I am is contained in that involution. The hidden reality of the truth of my existence lies inside of me and evolves over time. And number 5, each moment, each thought, each setback, each joy reveals more and more the meaning of this truth to me. Number 6, these truths contain the negation of my past and the fulfillment of my destiny and purpose as a human being.
So now we're going to speak about principles 7 through 12, and you'll be able to see a architecture of how to go about creating a spiritual path. So let's get to it. Principle number 7 is I am learning to see the truth of who I am. You are, whether you're aware of it or not. And that's a potential barrier for all of us, whether we're aware of it or not. If you're not aware of the essence of your existence, of the truth of who you are, if you're not aware that you are here to evolve toward that truth, then you have no choice. You evolve according to the laws of nature, and that sucks. You evolve according to the laws of karma, to the laws of your lower mind. And I'll give you another word that basically summarizes that path. It's called suffering.
It reminds me of a couple of years ago, our older daughter called and she said, "Do you think people get crazier as they get older?" And I thought about it for a minute and I said, I think people go in the trajectory they're going, unless there is an intervention or there is a learning or there is an aspiration to interrupt that trajectory, because the lower mind is all about self-doubt and being less than and not being loved and being threatened and certainly not being eternal. It's like sitting on the roof of the Monroe Hotel, feeling lost and confused, watching the clock and just feeling deeply saddened by your life and the way things were.
You can make a different choice and consciously choose to begin a spiritual path, a path of awakening. And I promise anybody, and I learned this was part of my beginning. You don't have to know how. We're trying to help the individual decrease the amount of time in confusion and despair by understanding that spiritual principle is available to you.
It's decrease the amount of time trying to find the answers out there,
exactly.
whether it's in books or in podcasts or
I can't,
in therapy or, we go on and on. Not that you can't find some answers in those locations, but finding the truth is going to be
and
inside.
we are not positioning ourselves of trying to tell anybody what the truth is, simply creating a bridge or a path that the individual undertake on their own and interpret that path on their own. I cannot stress this enough. You do not need to know how. Because once you begin with aspiration, a will, a fierce will, to aspire to know yourself, to know the truth of who you are, to fulfill the destiny of your lifetime, of your birth that your soul has chosen, there comes a point in that process where the divine, where that spiritual truth that you are seeking has no choice but to show up and meet your desire, the desire of your will. And suddenly there's a breakthrough.
That always gives me chills, Hayden, when you talk about that the divine has no choice but to show up. It's not John Wayne riding up on a horse and saving you, but it's your will, it's your aspiration that is the force that draws that to
You
yourself.
are learning to save yourself from yourself. That's essentially what it comes down
Well,
to.
from that individual perspective, this is the goal, awakening. From a collective perspective, the goal is the divinization of the planet. I mean, that's just so incredible to realize and to even imagine, to consider that the goal of your life is to awaken to the light that you are. And as we do that, as we awaken, then we can fulfill the goal of all of humanity, which is the divinization of the planet. It's heaven here on earth. And I think it's so important to hold on to, so important to strive toward, especially when we're in the midst of such deep contraction. So the next principle, Hayden, is I carry this truth inside of me. I must become one with this truth, live this truth, and realize this truth. So rather than it being an abstraction outside of me, it is something that I have to really, commune with and connect with. Yeah, a friend called me out of the blue yesterday, and she was sharing how she felt so overwhelmed and beaten down. She said specifically by the last 9 months, and as she was talking, I just became aware I had this really amazing image of this light inside her. It was like a star. It wasn't big, but it was really bright, and it was kinda gently like pulsating like a star. And I shared the image with her as we were speaking. And, we both kind of reflected on a minute and then our conversation continued. And after a bit, we hung up and went about our day. She texted me. I read you the text yesterday, late in the afternoon. And she said, "What an extraordinary day. Thank you for being such a big part of it. Thank you for the wonderful insights." And I don't know what part I was in her extraordinary day, but I have to imagine that it was reminding her of that light that's already there in each of us, just waiting for us to pull back the veil so that not only we can see it, but so can others, and we can bring that into the world. The truth that you seek about your life is not outside of you, it is already inside of you, and yet you may have to seek outside of you as you are on this journey. And you and I have always said no one gets there alone. And having teachers is one of the greatest gifts that we've ever had. But the truth is inside of you because that is who you are. And going back to last week, the spiritual principle that said before I could evolve, something had to be involved in my birth. And this is our task. It's to become the truth of who you are. The light is there, but it's not forcing its way through. The mother talks about this. It's just quietly there. It doesn't need to be aggressive or assertive. It's not trying to burn away the fog of everyday life or reveal all the secrets of the universe to you in some golden burst, but it's there to guide us on our path to the truth of who you are and why you're here.
And how long that takes is mathematically dependent upon how conscious you are. They really are the same. That realization, the level of realization that the individual practices is mathematically commensurate with the level of transformation that they experience in their life. Once you come into physical form, once you take birth, the infinite, or you could say the divine or God, the absolute, is now enclosed in the finite. Once you take birth, the infinite is enclosed in the finite. And once this occurs, then there is the emergence, the creation of a center, an axis, you could say, around which you have to learn to live your life. But the axis gives rise to, or it creates the plane. Now, the plane can't exist without the axis. And what's the point in the axis being there if there's no plane? So here's that interconnectedness between the individual the individual in a physical body and the spiritual reality that created that. And it's a wonderful place to begin. We'll have to talk about that in another
It
episode
kind of
in
brings
more
us back
depth.
to physics because everything has an axis and everything has a plane. That's how things move and that's how they retain
Well,
balance.
let's look at the axis in the world today. It's
Ooh,
not just leaning; it has
teetering.
fallen.
Yeah.
And so, what happens to the plane when the axis
It's no
is
longer supporting
damaged?
it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. However, that's at the collective. The individual can maintain that axis and that plane, even though the collective axis and the collective plane is falling apart.
And what Haydn is talking about, the axis and the plane, that center is exactly why we've created the Becoming You journey. And we're about to start our fourth year of this online curriculum. We recognize it's one thing to hear these 12 principles in our podcast, but it's a completely different thing to actually anchor your life around them, especially when the world is in this state of collapse. So we didn't want to just give you information. We don't want it to just be at that lower level. We want to give you the bridge and create the map for really applying these principles. So the Becoming You,
And do with it as you please.
right?
You know,
It is very
look at it through your own life and what that
exactly.
means to you.
That's the most important thing. That's the only way really to do it. But the Becoming You journey, it's an online community and we meet monthly, but it's an immersive, it's a guided experience designed to help you do exactly what we're discussing, to shift your burden from the emotional and the mental to the spiritual. It's a deep dive kind of into finding out more about your beautiful self, providing you with the tools to find your balance and your light, even um, when the gravity of the world around you or especially even when it feels heavy. So if you're feeling that kind of pull to move beyond just being a bystander to this global shift or just feeling the overwhelm of it, if you're ready to move from doomer to awakened, we invite you to join us. You can find everything you need to start at becomingyoujourney.com. It's an opportunity to stop looking at the temporary nature of the outer world and start engaging with the eternal truth of your inner self.
Well, but because once you find that axis, the chaos of the plane no longer has the power to pull you off center for long. You know,
Mhm.
I like keeping these conversations real. We have our moments where, where we move into the darkness, and that's okay. But spiritual growth decreases the amount of time that you even would allow for that because
Hmm.
now you are aware of a different reality. So that brings us to spiritual principle number 9. Now this is a quote, I, ignorant, and the knower beyond time, the self above nature, above my fate.
So even though I'm kind of stupid and don't get it,
I
is
am
that what he
still
said?
the divine. I am
Yeah.
still God, I am still the higher being.
Mhm.
And this is the issue of living in two worlds simultaneously. Although I am ignorant, I am also the knower beyond time. I have an ego, but I'm not my ego. I have a mind, but I'm not my mind. You have a body, but you are not your body. You have emotions, but you are not your emotions. You are the self above nature, above your fate. You are your soul. And this is what the evolutionary process is all about. In fact, if the spiritual did not exist, then there would be no meaning to the cycles of our life, to the difficulties and
To
sufferings
the
we
passage
face.
of time.
Exactly. If the spiritual did not exist, there would be no way out. But it does exist, and that is who you are. So, the, are you ready for this? Are you ready for what I'm getting ready to say? You are the way out of this mess. And the way out is the way in. The way out is experienced when you realize that you, ignorant, are the knower beyond time, the self above nature, above your fate. You have to figure out how to get out of the darkness without leaving the darkness. You transform it through your own conscious realization of greater truth of who and what you are and your existence.
Hayden, as you were talking about that, it made me kind of think about the dying star again. And if God or the divine, whatever you call that, the absolute, if it could not manifest, then all of the energy of the divine would be confined. Would Then all of the energy of the divine would just be confined. You are evidence of the release. You are the manifestation of, along with billions of other people and everyone you know, even the ones you say, "You're sure?"
The crazy ones.
are the same. They're the release. They're the manifestation. They're the in real time, visible of the invisible. The next principle is becoming this truth is the eternal significance and meaning of my life. So it's a never ending journey, lifetime after lifetime of realization that leads to transformation. Transformation that exists at endless levels of knowing, manifesting, and being. And time, which sometimes seems to drag, as we've talked about, and sometimes seems to fly, is the tool of the soul to enact this miracle of the divine, manifesting into form, into you. The formless and the formed are the same. The invisible and the visible are one.
And the mind can't get that.
No.
That's why the difficulty in a spiritual path begins with the mind seeing what you just said is, that's crazy. That's an illusion. That's why I don't believe in this stuff, because the mind cannot get that. But again, I'll say it again, you're not your mind.
But we've talked about if we're going to choose something to believe, do I want to believe that I'm flawed, that I'm screwed up, that I'm less than, that I'm alone in this, that it's all a crapshoot? Or do I want to choose to at least open the door number 4, to believing that the invisible and the visible are one, that I am not only in a kind of esoteric surface way, the spark of the divine, that is really what I am. And then how would that change the way that I see myself and how that I move through difficulties, to know that everything that happens, joyful and unbearable, are the mechanisms by which the divine is realized in physical form.
There is no such thing as meaninglessness. No such thing.
How could it be meaningless if we are the manifestation of the divine? It seems like that's extremely pregnant with meaning.
That's our journey.
Even as we've said several times, the acorn is pregnant with the oak tree. From its source, we are the same.
Well, this brings us to spiritual principle number 11. As I become more and more conscious of my existence, my daily life conforms to these deeper truths of my being. It's kind of like suddenly out of the blue, you begin to experience a little bit at a time how to create the life that you really desire. You begin to see even glimpses, even in a dream, of your destiny that was contained in your birth. And this begins to add up and begins to manifest in your everyday life, that you once thought that the best thing to do was jump off the roof, and all of a sudden it begins to reveal this meaning to you.
And there's a way for everyone. For us lately, or for the past 12, 14 years, we've really been students of, in particular, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. But as we said, people walk on 2, dogs walk on 4, birds fly, snakes slither, bunnies hop. There's a way for everybody. And for me in this journey, what I realized, you and I were sitting in a workshop together, and I could get my feelings hurt once in a while on that, because I would think, oh, Hayden's such a great teacher. I'm not sure I'm ever going to be able to articulate it the way Hayden does, things like that. And I'd get activated, I think quietly, that people didn't notice, but I was activated inside. And I started to notice that wasn't happening anymore. as I invested in my own inner journey. I noticed that really I was happier. I didn't feel the weight of all that self-doubt nearly as often. I didn't get upset over little things. I didn't take offenses easily. I didn't feel the sadness of screwing up again, for example. And it truly becomes the joy of the dance because like you said, Hayden, the joyful and the unbearable, they're all mechanisms by which I'm coming to realize the eternalness of my true self. So for me, it wasn't out of the blue. It was more like being out in the fog. And when you're out in the fog, you don't know if you're getting soaking wet till you come inside and your hair's wet and your clothes are damp. It's a process. So I know what you just said. I thought was such a great comment, which is that's why people say, well, this stuff's pie in the sky. It really is an opportunity for us to look at it as a process, to invest in yourself, to invest in the process of becoming yourself, rather than worrying about how is it going to turn out or what's going to happen next. Investing in that inner part of yourself and becoming more and more tuned in to who you really are. And of course, we do that through mind, body, and emotions as well. But to be willing to, uh, open that 4th door and bring in the spiritual, and then the outcomes kinda come as a result of the process.
Naturally.
Yeah.
They come naturally. In a great book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, Shunryu Suzuki tells this story about the 4 horses. He says the first horse runs fast all of the time. The second horse runs fast, but only when he sees the rider reaching for the whip. The third horse only runs fast when he sees the shadow of the whip coming down on his skin. And the fourth horse only runs fast when he feels the pain of the whip reach the marrow of his bones. And the question that he poses is, which one is the most valuable horse? And the answer is the fourth one, because he's the only one of the 4 that now knows that suffering is not necessary in order to run fast. And that's how we learn. But the world has changed. Our learning has changed. We can speed this up.
I've always loved that story, Hayden, about the 4 horses because I think I've definitely been the 4th horse. Very, resistant to change, resistant to feedback, resistant to, even the truth. I would maybe that can't be right. And so when the pain of the, whip reaches the marrow of our bones, we have no other choice. And as you said, we don't have to continue learning through suffering. And that brings us to our last principle. The meaninglessness of my old life has dissolved into the waters of my being. Everything really now can start to make sense. Even the most absurd, the most difficult things, everything makes sense as everything is playing its role. In this great unfolding, there is nothing that is meaningless, even the unbearable, even the darkness. The meaninglessness of my old life has been replaced with a spiritual path. The path, it's not necessarily paved with gold and, flowers along the way, but it is leading to the heart of your existence.
And personal mastery
Yeah.
and transformation. So at this time, let's summarize all 12 principles. Let's consolidate so we can see the totality of what we are learning. Number 1, I'm a spiritual being in a physical world, but I have to develop my spirituality. Before I could evolve, something had to be involved in my birth. Nothing can evolve out of me that was not contained in me at the start. The truth of who I am is contained in that involution. The hidden reality of the truth of my existence lies inside of me and evolves over time. And that's time with a capital T. Each moment, each thought, each setback, each joy reveals more and more the meaning of this truth to me. These truths contain the negation of my past and the fulfillment of my destiny and purpose as a human being. I am learning to see this truth of who I am. I carry this truth inside of me. I must become one with this truth, live this truth, and realize this truth. For I, ignorant, am the knower beyond time, the self above nature, above my fate. Number 10, becoming this truth, then, is the eternal significance and meaning of my life. As I become more and more conscious of my existence, my daily life conforms to these deeper truths of my being. And spiritual principle number 12, and under these circumstances, the meaninglessness of my old life dissolves into the waters of my being.
We've kind of come a long ways from the roof of that Monroe Hotel.
I'd say
Looking into the dark chasm where the truth can seem really impossible to reach, much less accept. But as we've moved through these 12 principles, we hope that you've begun to find some clarity. The gravity of the soul isn't just a force that pulls us down into the depths of our own experience. It is a magnetic pull of the divine, drawing you to the truth of who you are.
but it's not that. May the force be with you is correct. It's understanding that you and the force are the same. And no matter how much collapsing the world does around you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change that truth. But as we've said, this evolution has to be lived out inwardly, and it requires an effort and a will and an aspiration of space where you can step away from the noise of you could say, the doomer narrative and sit with the knower beyond time that resides in you.
And that's really what we're going to do this summer. We would love for you to join us for a deep kind of in-person immersion into this work. We're hosting a Becoming You workshop at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. It's going to be July 31st through August 2nd. We would love to see you there.
This is 3 days of dedicated focus. It's an opportunity to take these 12 principles off the screen or out of your earbuds and actually work with them, and so they become part of your daily life. Although that's just a part of the workshop, we'll be working together to identify and help build and create that axis that I spoke about, to dissolve the old meaninglessness and help you step into a greater conscious understanding of who and what you are in the middle of this new world being born today.
There's something really extraordinary that happens. We had our conference here in Asheville in September and felt it. Of course, all the 35 years that we've worked with groups, there's something extraordinary that happens when a group of people gather with this collective will to aspire, with this collective will to become. And I'm lucky I get to spend all this time. Thank you, Haydn, for the time that we get to be together, not only in our relationship and our best friendness, but in this work together, because that's how breakthroughs can happen. They're much more accessible when we have each other to grow and share with.
If you are in touch with or have an idea about this fierce will that I referred to, or even something quietly stirring inside of you that wants to learn more, then visit our website, truthspringasheville.com. You'll find the registration to the Omega program, as well as other details about our work.
Right?
Yes.
So thank you for walking this 3-part path with us, the gravity of the soul. Remember that your outer world is a mirror of your inner condition. It's not something that's happening to you. You're much more creative, much more powerful than that. And your transformation is what will change the outcomes of the world.
Train your mind and your heart to see this greater unfolding of your life and your existence. You are the way out through the way in.